In the end, I didn't love church. I found it cold and unwelcoming. They made me stand on newspaper just inside the front door. And then I got harangued by the vicar. I got walloped on a regular basis. I thought that was part of going to primary school. I thought that was just what happened.
Lady Danbury is just so loved. Has that taken you by surprise, or did you have an inkling?
I think any artist who does that is a fool.
You are inhabiting these other people. Is there an element where you have to be like, somewhere there is a line between me and them, and then you have to find that?
No, you have to pour yourself into them. You can't draw a line between them. I've played characters who murder children. That person does not think they are bad or wrong.
What is the specific power of story and storytelling?
We live our lives by stories. There's not one aspect of our life that's not story.
What are some of the most destructive stories that we are telling ourselves right now? This podcast is supported by Stewardship, helping Christians be the best stewards of the resources that God gives them.
Radical generosity has always been central to the Christian story. Stewardship helps make it part of your everyday life.
For over a century, Stewardship has been working with generous Christians and the ministries they support.
They help you give well and see your generosity make a real difference.
If you want to give generously and wisely, a Stewardship Giving Account makes that simple.
You can support over 12,000 registered charities and ministries with ease, and even build a balance to set aside funds for when the right moment or opportunity comes.
Discover more at stewardship.org.uk. Welcome to the Re-Enchanting podcast with me, Belle Tyndall. We are the podcast brought to you by Seen and Unseen, the podcast where we talk all things re-enchantment. Are we a disenchanted world? And if so, can re-enchantment be found in the Christian story? We ponder that with all kinds of guests from all corners of the cultural landscape. And today we are so excited. We have Adjoa Andoh joining us. So let me give a quick introduction, although she needs none. Adjoa Andoh MBE is an award-winning actress, a passionate social activist, and a fellow of the Royal Society of Literature. So whether it be on stage with the Royal Shakespeare Company, on screen as Bridgerton's formidable Lady Danbury, or behind closed doors as a judge for the Booker Prize, Adjoa has helped to tell and share some of our most beloved stories. And so that's what we'll be talking about today, the stories that Adjoa breathes in and breathes out, the ones she finds herself telling on and off stage. Adjoa, I honestly cannot think of a better way to start my day than talking to you. Thank you so much for being on Re-Enchanting.
Oh, well, that's a very lovely thing to say, Belle. I will tell my family you said that on a grumpy morning.
Do.
Belle would like to start the day with me.
And anytime they're unwilling, Adjoa, I'm just on the other end of the phone.
Okay, I'll give you a ring.
There's so much. As I'm looking at my notes there, I'm like, oh, I want to go to that question and that one and that one. But our first question is always the same. And it's because we compile the answers and then we put it out as a reading list at the end of each season on seenandunseen.com. I know. So, Adjoa Andoh.
Yes.
Tell me what you're reading at the moment.
Well, Belle, I'm going to be tricky because I've only just started this book. So I'm going to tell you what I just put down and then what I've just picked up. Is that right?
Perfect. Yeah.
Richard Flanagan's The Narrow Road is the one I've just finished. It was made into a TV series. Read the book. The book's always best.
Always.
An absolutely devastating account of an Australian doctor who ends up in a prisoner of war camp building one of those notorious bridges in the Far East. He's also he ends up becoming the medic for the prisoners of war who are with him, and he reflects back on his life. Oh, it's just the most. It's just, you know, if you need an indictment for what on earth are we doing with our wars, it's the book. Just put human beings right in the middle of the story, and everything just seems like a horrific idea. So that one, and now I've gone from that to An American Marriage by Tayari Jones, Tayari, Tayari Jones.
Amazing.
And it's about a sort of black middle class American couple who are living their best life. They love each other, they love their jobs, everything's fine. And then he gets arrested for a crime that she's convinced he did not commit and sentenced to 12 years in jail. So it's about what happens to them.
Wow. Okay. So you've got one foot in one and one foot in the other right now.
Yes. So light comedies, obviously. I'm reading some light comedies.
Yeah. Yes. Light comedies. You were a judge for the Booker Prize,
I was.
which to me sounds like the dream gig, but also slightly torturous in that when you are actively like judging books, what are you, gosh, how do you even start? What are you looking for? What unravels you?
So my husband writes novels. So the first thing to say is I live through novelists doing their work.
Okay.
My feeling is you have to honour that 5 years that book may have taken someone to write, maybe more, maybe slightly less, but it's a long old haul and it's quite a solitary endeavour. So I felt as a judge that it was my duty to match the stamina of the author with my stamina at reading. I think we read 165 books.
In how long?
In about 7 months.
My gosh.
Yeah. And what was I doing at the time? I was filming Bridgerton.
Yeah.
And I was also directing and playing Richard III.
Okay. So it was an easy year, not much on the plate.
And producing as well, yeah. So I was like,
I bet.
all year. And that was actually and my elderly dog was dying. So it was just a year of and actually reading that variety of books was really fantastic. Because there were so many ups and downs in the emotional and physical pitch of my year. Having that variety of voices was kind of part of the madness of the year, and lovely. And I just felt a real duty to honour those writers, but also the potential readers, because I know my eldest daughter is a avid, voracious book reader, and she tries to read all of the long list at least.
Okay.
So it's something for the readers and the writers. But it was a beautiful thing, and I felt so honoured to be asked. I loved it, and I loved all the people on my judging panel as well. So it was it was a super interesting year. What a gift.
What a gift. I can imagine. This is maybe, if anyone asked me this question, I'd cry. So sorry. But what is your favourite book you've ever read, do you think?
There's a favourite childhood book, and I can't remember the name of the author. It's called The Happy Farm.
Okay.
It's Italian, and it's a small grey, it's a little, square book. It's about an inch thick with a red spine and the most beautiful colour illustrations inside. And it's about a farm and all the animals on it. And I treasured that book when I was little. I would read, and it was a book that made me happy. So I'd read The Happy Farm, and it was it wasn't a baby book. It was a book for I don't know, somebody who was a junior reader, probably. So lots of small writing, big sentences, but beautiful illustrations, and it made me really happy. And it's an Italian author, and I might have a cheeky Google and find it in a minute. So that was my favourite childhood book. It just made me happy. I loved the illustrations. Everything about it made me happy. And I grew up in the Cotswolds, so I was around a lot of farms. And then my adult book, it has to be Beloved by Toni Morrison. And I read that book. It makes me so sad at one level that I can only read it on holiday, because I find it makes me struggle to function when I'm not somewhere where it's okay to be sad.
Absolutely.
But the thing about it's for people who don't know, it's a book about some enslaved Africans who are in America on plantations, about an escape, about what happens, what the consequences are, what the long-term lived experience is. So there's a lot in it that's extremely painful, with as many women did at the time, a woman who ends up killing her child rather than have that child go into slavery. That's not the end of the story, so it's not a spoiler alert in that way. The story goes on beyond that. But there's a section in the middle where the grandmother, Baby Suggs Holy, her name is, she, on a Sunday afternoon, when the enslaved people aren't obliged to work, there's a clearing in the woods that she calls everyone to, and it's the moment where she just talks about creation, about the body, about how they must love their bodies, because the world would teach them to hate their bodies and will abuse their bodies, but they must love their body. It's the most, I don't know, it's the most uplifting, so it's uplift in a way, in the middle of horror, to reconnect with your humanity and your soul and the blessing of you in the world. And Toni Morrison manages to create this pause in the misery, to let you see how people can manage themselves when what they're living with is unmanageable. Honestly, and actually during lockdown, I was asked to do, we all did loads of stuff online, and I read that passage for lots of different things, because I just felt like at a time when we were all actually being quite scared of our bodies and other people's bodies, to just go back into the blessing of this amazing thing that carries us around 24 hours a day. Felt like a good thing to do.
Oh, yeah, because I'm just thinking, I mean, that is such specific circumstances in which that passage is written and spoken and lives that I have no concept of, really. My wildest imagination couldn't take me there. And yet, loving your bodies in that way is always defiant.
It's absolutely, it's like, I can't remember who said it. Somebody said to me, whatever happens, they will not take my joy.
Wow.
And I think that staying in that place of joy, and for those of us with any sense of a love of creation, whether that's a faith-based one or whatever, it's a miracle that we of all the planets in the planetary system, here we are doing a conversation over the internet, and the miracle of what human beings can be, and that we manage to be on the planet that can sustain us and support us if we give it half a chance to. So yeah, I always think it's a good place to lean into us in nature and us as part of nature.
I agree. Even now, I'm like, like the miracle of our very here-ness,
Yeah. We're on a burning ball of gas spinning round in the middle of...
Yeah.
And yet here we are worrying about, going to the dentist or our latest book or...
Oh, gosh, it's wild. Okay, right. I'm going to stop myself from absolutely taking this conversation full pelt in that direction, because I could. How enchanting. Can you tell me about little Adjoa? You mentioned that you grew up in the Cotswolds. I'm in Bristol right now, so
That's where I was born.
Oh, there you go. Tell me about little Adjoa. I'm so intrigued by what sort of themes were whirling around you, the ideas, the hopes, the fears. Like, what was swirling around you as you were growing up?
Well, there are different chunks, really. I was born in Bristol, as I said. My mum came from Liverpool, and when she was 16, the family decamped to Bristol, and they lived in Clifton, just around the corner from the Downs. In a big old pile. She was there with her 4 siblings and her mum. Her aunt lived on the 2nd floor, and they rented the top floor out to students.
Wow.
So we were there until I was 6 months, and then we moved to Leeds. My mum got a job up there, so that's my football club till I die, Leeds United.
Okay.
And I remember Leeds quite vividly. We lived there till I was 4. It was I think my childhood was sort of a place of wonder. I found things wonderful. I remember I had a little boy I used to play with called Simon, who had white blonde hair, and he lived up the road from me. And the road was cobbled when I was a child. This is the 60s. I remember my bedroom. I remember my brother being born. I remember the kitchen. We lived in the upstairs flat. It was, I know from talking to my parents, my mum's English white, my dad is Ghanaian black, and them trying to find somewhere to live in Leeds was tricky. In the end, my mum sent my dad round Hay Park with me in the pushchair while she tried to get a foot in the door before people went,
Wow.
black man, white woman, I don't think we want you here. And eventually the flat we moved into was a flat where mum eventually said, oh yes, and I do have a daughter, and she's a baby, and my husband is African. And Auntie Jean, for so she would become, said, well, where are they? Bring them in. So they went out to the park and got them, and they came in. And so, yeah, it was a childhood. I just remember everything being enormous and kind of magical and wonderful. I'm sure that was a different experience for my parents, but that was my early childhood experience. And then we moved when my baby brother was born. I just thought it was marvelous, and apparently I was very protective and kept my beady eye on the health visitor whenever she came round.
I can believe that.
And then we moved back to Gloucestershire. So that was very different, because we went from living near Roundhay Park in an urban city, and then we moved to a village. I think there were 60 children in the whole of my primary school. I think the population was about 1,000 if you went around all the nooks and crannies and highways and byways, because it was basically one street with a few streets off it. We lived on the high street. It's very farming population. If you came from 3 miles away, people looked at you squintily, and we came from another planet, really. I was so there were 3 black people where we grew up. There was me, my dad, and my brother, and I had a very strong Yorkshire accent. So it was all a bit new and different, and it was quite a hostile entry into infants. I got walloped on a regular basis. I thought that was part of going to primary school. I thought that was just what happened. I used to nick money from my mum's purse to buy chocolate bars from the machine across the road at threepenny bits. And it wasn't until I was old, and then I would give those chocolates to some boys at school. And it wasn't until I was older I kind of went, oh, you were paying them protection money.
Yeah,
that's what you were doing. But
wow.
it didn't read like that to me as a little kid. I think you take your circumstances to be what they were. But it was also glorious. I loved primary school. By the juniors, I'd learned to headbutt people. I know, maybe not a nice thing to say on a Christian podcast, but there we are. And everything ceased. Everything became calm. So I learned to, there was a lady who lived across the wall in our back garden. They put me on an orange box, and I would climb over the wall to Miss Hall's. And she had a piano. She used to let me play her piano because we didn't have one then. And she would give me mint imperials, which I didn't really like, but they were sweet, so yum. And caraway seed cake, which I really didn't like, but it was cake, so I always ate it. And Miss Hall had been born in the 1800s, late 1800s, because it's the 60s. So she still used a mangle to do her clothes, and she still had an outside toilet. I remember the excitement when she had an indoor toilet put in. Very exciting. So I lived between. She would tell me about getting a penny pocket money, and she would separate it into 4 farthings and what you could get for 4 farthings. And we would go for walks to visit her friend Miss Chappell, who lived about. It must have been nearly an hour's walk outside the village up on Inglestone Common, and they'd been friends since they were children. So I got this insight into a really rural, different life that people were living, and I was I was part of that. So there were many glorious things about my childhood. Lots of walking in nature, building tree houses down by the Packhorse Bridge, which was a medieval bridge that went across the stream that the wool traders would use to herd their sheep across, and they would take them up to a place called Wootton under Edge, Wool Town under the edge of the Cotswolds, which we moved to when I was a teenager. So I had this fantastically rural childhood. I went out with pig farmers when I was older, and dairy herdsmen, and so all of that was beautiful. And I love nature. Nature's my favorite thing, and it's where I always go for when I need to reset myself.
Yeah. I'm also sensing, I mean, I guess with hindsight, maybe you can sense it too, little seeds of like what you would end up doing with so much of your life, because it seems to me like you were so captivated by characters, like by people, by what made them, the experiences that made them what they are. Were you always quite an imaginative person as well, do you think?
Yeah, I was a voracious reader, and I would make books. I would cut up bits of paper and stitch them together and make books, and I would illustrate them. I would do books, but I would also do annuals. And in the annuals, there would be quizzes. There would be like a problem page. There would be dot to dots. There would be in Bunty magazine, there used to be the cutout on the back, and you could put different outfits on them. So I had my own equivalent of different outfits, and there'd be stories. So I was very imaginative. I would also dress up a lot. I would wear tights on my head and have my mum's eyeliner across my nose if I was doing Pippi Longstocking. Obviously, red tights. I would wear my dad's old suits when I got older, but that was a lot more to do with being a punk, but it was still a dressing up thing. I would wear my mum's clothes with belts. I would buy things from jumble sales. You could see me walking up and down the village streets in a pair of clogs. I might wear a skirt on my head, gathered, that would be long, stripy t-shirt, and another skirt on my bottom half. That would be me trolling up and down the street in the 60s and 70s. Yeah.
That sounds, you've tell that so well. I can see it in my mind's eye. I used to have, you've unlocked a memory for me where I used to get secondhand annuals from my cousin's cousin, and so by the time they would get to me, all of the answers were in the book and the things were cut out, and yet it would still be like the best thing that I was receiving this Barbie annual, even though everything that could have been done to it had been done.
It was still coming to you, and it was still exciting.
Exactly. And in some weird way, it had the fabric of like previous people's experiences with it in it. And somehow that made it more magical. I haven't thought about annuals in a long time.
Oh, I love annuals. I still mourn that I haven't got my Diana annuals. Diana for little girls. I had 4 of them, 1970 to 74. And then I don't know what happened, I don't know what happened to them, but I loved them. I used to read lots of Enid Blyton. I was a Secret 7 girl, and I would sit in the woods with a packet of juicy fruit chewing gum, and that would be me for the afternoon. And so we had a famous 4 club, me and my brother and 2 friends from next door but one, and I made us all club books. It was pink card on the outside, it was white on the inside with club rules, and we would try and solve mysteries. We would sit in the bus shelter and we would write down car number plates because there were so few cars that would go by that it was a thing. And I did a program with Pam Ayres once, and she said she was doing the same thing in her village. So it's like, that's a rural childhood for you. And we found a key once, and that was very exciting. And it turned out to belong to the village hall. But there we are. I did lots of that, and I would direct little plays, things I'd never seen. I remember choreographing the Planet Suite. And then I remember doing a play in a friend's front room, and we charged, this is after decimalisation came in, and we charged all our parents 2p to enter for hours of interminable screaming children, window net curtains, a lot of that going on, and lights being switched on and off.
All the ingredients were there. They were all there.
So imaginative it was. It was a childhood of play.
Oh, I love that. Was faith a key ingredient in your childhood, would you say?
So in the infants at my school was a teacher called Mrs. Porter. And Mrs. Porter ran a sort of scripture union on a Friday evening at her house. And I can't remember how this worked because I was in the infants, but I think a bunch of us went to her house, and she lived in Wootton under Edge. So I think she must have had to drive us there and drive us back afterwards. And I went to her scripture union classes on and off until I was about 15. So that was happening on a Friday. Then midweek, I went to a Bible class run by the Reverend Royston Pick in the chapel. That was more early teenage. And I went to chapel on a Sunday. Chapel was actually the Congregational Church. We just called it chapel. And the village was definitely split between those people who went to the Anglican Church, which was down the hill, pub at the bottom of the hill, obviously. And then you go up the drive, past the graveyard, and there was the church on the hill, St. Mary's. So the village was split between people that went to St. Mary's and people that went to chapel. But we didn't call it St. Mary's or Congregational Church. We called it Church and Chapel. Yes. And it seemed to be that if you owned land or you worked for people who owned land, and the Earl of Ducie owned most of the land around us, and so people would work for the Earl of Ducie, then you went to church. If you worked anywhere else, or you were a bit more, I don't know, left wing, you went to chapel. And the rule was everybody went to church or chapel till they were 14, because in those days you could leave school at 14. And then once you were old enough to leave school, you were old enough to make your own choice about whether you attended or not. So I went to chapel. I used to go on a Sunday morning, and then I would go for Sunday school in the afternoon. And sometimes I would go for the evening service as well.
Full Sunday, the triple whammy.
Full Sunday. But then when I was 8, I decided I wanted a bell ring, and they didn't do that at chapel. So I defected.
You went down the hill.
I went down the hill and up the hill, and I did bell ringing. And I joined the choir at church because you got 18 whole pence a month if you were in the choir. So we were earning some big buckaroos. and I did that for a bit, and I loved bell ringing. They would stand me on the ubiquitous orange box again, and I would have to, it'd be like, let go, Adj, let go of the rope, or else it will take you up. So I would let go of the rope, so I wouldn't be taken up. But I loved bell ringing. But in the end, I didn't love church. I found it cold and unwelcoming, and frankly, completely unfathomable for an 8-year-old. So then I defected back to chapel, but not before the vicar had given me. I went. Mum said, "You have to go around and tell him that you're leaving." I was like, "Oh!" So I went round to the vicar's. They made me stand on newspaper just inside the front door. And then I got harangued by the vicar, and I couldn't tell him. I didn't feel able to tell him I was going back to chapel. It felt like it was worse. It would be worse to say I was going to chapel than to leave him with the impression that I was just abandoning faith. That's how sharp the demographics were about where you went. Yeah. So I didn't tell him, and he harangued me about losing my faith, and I cried and I left. Then I went back to chapel, and I stayed there until we moved from the village in my teens. And then I went to things like the Dick Saunders crusade that were happening, big tent crusades. Everybody seemed to be wearing cheesecloth and playing guitars. I thought it was marvellous. All the boys had long hair. But then I became a punk, and I did both for a bit, and then I just stopped going. And but interestingly, at my church, that seems to be the story of many church children, that they wander off for a bit and then they come back.
Yeah, there's this idea, I think, that maybe the Christian story isn't, and actually in a way your vicar kind of like solidified
No, that
this.
vicar was not good. I'm sorry.
No, not good. And we're
Don't
just
put the kibosh on an 8-year-old.
No, exactly.
Or make them stand on newspaper at the front door, I would
Gosh,
suggest. Anyways, simpler times.
So, yeah. Well, what I was thinking then was there can be this idea that Christianity, the Christian story, that cannot hold multitudes. It cannot hold anything that's not neat and tidy. It cannot hold doubt or wrestling. It cannot hold interest in other things even. It can't hold this stuff. So then it feels like, well, if I have anything else, that has to go, because that paradigm isn't strong enough to hold it. And it sounds to me like at the age of 8, your vicar stood you on a newspaper and solidified that belief within you of like,
well,
this
no,
is
because
what it
I went
looks
back
like.
to chapel.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And I went back to chapel. But what he solidified my belief was in, I'm better off at chapel. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Which is,
Church is not for you.
For me, any way that we get in the way of God and people's relationship with God is null point.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and that's absolutely, when we were saying about, before we started broadcasting, and we were talking about having a faith conversation that doesn't assume that your audience has a faith, or I guess if they're listening, they may be vaguely interested. But I had an amazing vicar when I was doing my reader training, and one of the things he said to me about if you're leading from the front is never assume. Shout out Cameron Barker, the Reverend Cameron Barker. Love all day long. Love you. Never assume that the person walking in through the door has ever walked into a church before, and never assume that this has been an easy walk for them to get through that front door.
Yeah.
So you do, maybe it's about being a performer as well, but when you're leading, I am a bit hardline about this. When you are leading, you have to assume that the person has no idea what, that, this is the Book of Common Prayer, that's a pew sheet, there's the hymn books, blah, 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 nothing. So you every time you lead, never mind if half the congregation be coming for, before you were born. When you lead, you say, now we come to our time of confession. Please join in with the words in bold on page 2 of the service. Lay it out for people so that they don't have to feel awkward or embarrassed or confused or lost at any moment while they're in your building. They should feel welcome, and you have to hold them. You have to be the secure frame that holds them, so that they are not distracted and they can have their time with God, because that's the point.
This episode is brought to you by Stewardship, a Christian charity making generosity simple and intentional.
A Stewardship Giving Account gives you one place to manage all of your giving, regular or one-off, available 24/7.
Discover more at stewardship.org.uk.
I think a lot about, there's this sort of phrase, it comes from the philosopher Charles Taylor. It talks about humans as storied creatures.
Yep.
And, he's got a whole book about this, so I'm in no way going to encapsulate what he says, but this idea that both individually and collectively, we understand the happenings around us in terms of story. And I was just wondering your thoughts on that. Do you agree? What is the specific power of story and storytelling, do you think?
Well, listen, you're talking to someone who makes a living from storytelling.
Yeah. It would be quite rogue, actually, if you sort of came out and said, no, I think story's pretty powerless, actually.
Yeah, it would. It'd make me unemployable, which wouldn't be good.
Don't do that.
No, and I think the opposite. I mean, you can tell from my wanging on about my childhood that story's always been important to me. Everybody, we live our lives by stories. That there's not one aspect of our life that's not a story. How do I get to, where's the garage? Right, you want to go down the road, you'll see a little cafe on the corner, take a right down there, and then take the first left. There's a sort of weird tree that's half fallen, and everything is a story. We tell ourselves stories about who we are as a human being. You're lovable, you're not lovable, you're really good at blah, you're terrible at blah. We tell ourselves stories. Our faiths all our faiths are based on story. What's the Bible if not loads of stories? Jesus tries to talk about intellectual and concepts, spiritual concepts, in a way that doesn't blow people's minds, so we tell stories. You know, we speak in graspable chunks. When scientists were trying to explain complicated aspects of science to various American governments, they would get in storytellers to work with the scientists to tell the story in a way that could then be shared with politicians so they could understand what on earth was going on. You know, we live by story. We tell some terrible stories. We tell stories about, you know, people's motivations and why they do things and why they don't do things. We judge people on stories that we may have had implanted in us about who they are, without ever having met them or experienced them. Or, you know, we tell stories are powerful for good and ill.
Yeah, what are some of this was a question for later on, but let's go for it now. What are some of the most destructive stories that we are telling ourselves right now, do you think?
That another human being is not us. I would say that's the number one story that we're telling. And I would say, and I've forgotten her name. Last year's Wreath lecturer. The Wreath lectures are lectures that are done on BBC Radio to celebrate Wreath, who was the founder of the BBC, and the last year's Wreath lecturer was a woman. I'm going to get this wrong. A psychologist, I think she was, who works exclusively with violent men, incarcerated violent men. And her first question always is not, what did you do? But what happened to you?
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
So for me, that's the most important question to ask any human being. And at the moment, lots of the most dangerous stories that we're telling are not about looking at the humanity of another human being, but just deciding that they did something, whether they did or not, who knows? And we're going to judge them on that. Or they will do something, or they think something, or, you know. So I think we don't have God vision, but I think we need to live our lives in a way that allows that we don't have God vision, which means we don't know everything. So yeah, God vision, just like the past, present, and future perspective on who we are and what's going on. So, you know, that day you go to, I remember Philip Yancey talking about this. So Philip Yancey is an American theologian, and I was doing a movie in South Africa, and he was going to be speaking, and I was attending a church there, and somebody from the church was going. So I just became a bit of a Yancey stalker in the best possible way.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, but I remember him, and then I read lots of his books. I remember him talking about his wife had sent him to the supermarket to just get some things, and he was like, "I'm so busy, I don't have time for this." So he goes to the supermarket and he gets the bits because, you know, his busyness is nothing in compared with his wife being cross. So yeah, so he goes and he gets to shopping and he's queuing at the, you know, 8 items or less till. And the woman behind the till is faffing around with something, and there's somebody ahead of him, and the time is going on, and he's like, "Come on!" And he gets to the till, and he has this moment where he just goes, "Ba-drink," and he goes, "I don't know what it took for that woman to get to the till this morning. You know, what's happening in her life? Has she got, you know, did she have to get the kids off? Is the kid sick? Is she having problems with her partner? Does she have no partner? What happened to the daycare? Did she get the bus? Is it, you know, all those things to get her to be behind the till. And now the machine is playing up and she can see there's this really cross looking man in the queue coming, you know. So he just let it all cool out because we don't know what's going on in someone's life. I think of, and I know that this is not everybody's process, but I think about the worst people who we might cite as being worst people who committed awful violent acts or are geeing people up to be hostile to their neighbours or more often to strangers. Yeah. And my question would be, what happened to you? Because I don't believe that's how we come into the world. I just don't. I think the capacity of the human spirit for wonder and empathy and love and care and all those things, I have absolute faith in that. And when people go, well, it's just human nature to be this or hostile or, just look after your own, forget about it, all of that. Is it though? Or is it human nurture? Is that what we've been acculturated to? I look at the sweetness of small children. I always go back to children because I think it doesn't matter how old we get, we're always in that child place at some level. And I look at people who are bullies, and I think, who bullied you? What happened to you? And I think that we live in a world that wants us to go fast, but I think the human heart needs to go slower than fast. And I think that's because we have monetary systems that want, click on this, pick up the noise, and I think that we need solitude, and we need quiet, and we need to be bored, and we need time to reflect, and all those things that, you just have to be able to take a step back and go, hang on. And quite often life doesn't allow for that. So I think we need to go slower. If you're asking me about what's happening with the world, I think we need to go slower, and I think we need to see the humanity, the us in other people. And and from a Christian perspective, and it's not only the Christian faith that said this, the idea of love your neighbor as yourself. Who was your neighbor? Every human being in the world. But what do you have to do first? Love yourself. You have to love your neighbor as yourself. If you're not loving yourself, if there has been hardship in your life that you don't value yourself or don't rate yourself or feel like you only get a sense of your own self-worth by being able to lord it over someone else, that's where the trickiness starts. Are we making a world in which people are able to love themselves?
Yes. Or in which they are loving themselves so poorly that loving their neighbours as themselves is to love their neighbours really badly.
Exactly.
That's the way you phrased that, the lie that other people are not us, being a destructive lie. I guess in some way your work as an actress is an absolute antithesis to that. Is it, in that you are inhabiting these other people? And is there an element where you have to be somewhere, there is a line between me and them, and then you have to find that? Because otherwise it doesn't.
No, you have to pour yourself into them.
Okay.
You have to. You can't draw a line between them. I've played characters who murder children or sell organs and do all sorts of things. That person does not think they are, at some level, they will justify their behavior. They will not think that they are bad or wrong, or they may think, I'm not doing a good thing, but I have to do this because of or that level of empathy may have been knocked out of them at some time in their life. So you have to pour yourself into it, actually, and you have to go to the places where you think, how could I? What is there in me that I can invest in that person to fill them out?
Oh, okay.
And to imbue them. No, you have to do that if you're being because otherwise, if you don't imbue that character with that humanity, how will anybody watching ever be able to get beyond going, oh, they're a bad person, down with a bad person, to think, because what we want to do is create a world where that person doesn't have to become a bad person or be forced into being a bad person. It's the difference between incarcerate and throw away the key and incarcerate to rehabilitate. And I will always live in a place. I want to be hopeful.
Yes.
I think we're built to be hopeful, because otherwise we just lie down and turn up our toes.
Yeah.
We're built to be hopeful. So how do we engender hope? How do we encourage hope? How do we help people hold their nerve when it feels hopeless? What are we doing? And that can be your next door neighbor, that could be your kid, that could be your lover, that could be your mother, that could be someone 1,000 miles across the world who you've never met and you don't know their name, but you want to support the move towards hopefulness.
Is that I was going to ask, what stories do you find yourself wanting to tell? When you look back through your career, the roles that you've loved and maybe the roles that you haven't loved. I don't know if like you even think about them in those terms. But do you see a thread running through them where you're like, oh, do you know what? I can see that I am drawn to this type of story. It's the one I want to tell constantly.
Well, Belle, first of all, you're making a great assumption about the self-employed worker.
I see. Okay.
Sometimes one doesn't go, oh, I think I'll do this or I'll do that. You're like, oh God, it's a job. Thank you. Thank you.
Phew.
Yes,
There we
I
go.
will take it. So for
Okay.
me, the only stories, the only, the only work that you don't really love is the work where it's not very well written.
I see.
That aside, any medium, any character, I'm up for it. Absolutely, because all of humanity is all of humanity, and that will come with its own, bumps and kinks and all those things along the way. If it's not written well, it's hard to do something with it. And that's the challenge. And obviously, in your career, you will take all the jobs, and some of them will be better written than others. And you will, and then your challenge will be, well, how can we make this as doable and as credible as possible? And then that becomes a challenge. But I want this. I want to communicate. We're supposed to be in communion with one another. The human body is built for it. Oh, gosh, you'll see, I've said this a million times, so it's nothing new. But you put a bunch of people in an audience, or a church, or a gurdwara, or all our hearts will start to beat together. The hearts sync up. Literally, they sync up because biologically, that's what we're built for. You take a bunch of women on tour, all our periods will happen at the same time, for better or ill.
Yeah.
Because we are built to be together. We are, it doesn't mean that we have to be chained to each other 24 hours a day. Nobody wants that, frankly. But we are built to be in communion. Without, the body is built for it. So communication and community and all those things that are about communing with people, that's kind of where I'm at. And so communication and storytelling is, and if we communicated better with each other, we could work a lot of things out, the way we just shout at each other and then throw things and then.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes total sense. I can't not ask you about Bridgerton. I can't not.
What?
People would be...
It would be remiss.
It would be remiss.
Yes.
We are in touching distance, I think, aren't we, of a new season?
We are.
We are. And it was my favourite book, actually, season 4.
Was it?
Yeah, I think probably, yeah. And you are Lady Danbury. You have poured yourself into that beautiful role, and Lady Danbury is just so loved. I mean, Bridgerton is so deeply cherished. Has that taken you by surprise, or did you have an inkling as you were communicating this story? Did you think this is going to garner such adoration and sort of joy and all of that?
I think any artist who does that is a fool.
Really? Okay.
You never know how anything's going to turn out. All you can do is respond to the material in front of you and go, oh, that's fabulous, or not for me. So for me, the starting point was that I read the sides for Lady Danbury, because you never get a whole script, because they don't know if they're going to hire or not. And scripts are like the crown jewels. They're sort of sacrosanct and must be shielded. Yeah. So I read the sides and I just went, oh, I could do something with her. I know what I could do with her. And then I went along for the audition. And it was a Friday afternoon, and the casting director had a train to catch, and it was quite a late appointment. And so we were both like, okay, we'll just do this. And we did it a couple of times. It was a delight. And then she went to catch her train, and I went to go to wander around Shoreditch. And that was that. And what I did feel was, sometimes you do an audition and always you eat your liver about, oh, why did I do it like that? And what was I thinking? And blah, 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 blah. That's just a given. And that never goes away. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing it. But sometimes you do it and you go, well, I've done the best. And I loved the process of getting to know this character, and I've loved doing this audition. And if they want me, great. And if they don't, well, I've done all I can do. And that was one of those where I just thought that was fabulous. And then I went away, and then I got the job, and that was absolutely thrilling. And then you can go, oh, hang on now. So this is a Netflix show, and it's based on a best-selling series, internationally best-selling series of books by Julia Quinn. Oh, and the whole thing is helmed and put together by Shonda Rhimes, who is the queen of the storytelling on the broadcasting land.
Yeah.
So then you put those bits together and you go, gosh, well, this might be something. But you have to think, 2019, Netflix was a thing, but it wasn't like on our radar in the way that it is today, because streaming wasn't really. Things change really fast. And then you have to add into that mix COVID. So the day that the show dropped was, it was on that Christmas day where it was, well, you can be together for 5 days. Oh no, it's 3 days. Oh no, it's 1 day. And actually, can you be outside? So, we were having a very truncated life. And I think lots of people were feeling isolated, concerned about what the future held. Nobody really understood what was coming down the tracks. And all those feelings of, any feelings of sorrow are made worse at Christmas. Let's be honest, they are.
Yeah.
Because that, we're supposed to be happy. And we're supposed to be with lots of people, and it's all supposed to be marvellous. So I think Bridgerton dropping on Christmas Day, people are on their own. It's a completely unexperienced new broadcasting phenomenon. It's fun, it's frothy, it's full of a real diverse cast. It's on steroids. It's that Ariana Grande that's being played by string quartet, all of that stuff. The costumes are like, there's lots of sex in it, if that's your thing. Lots of will they, won't they. Fantastic locations, beautiful stately homes. Everything about it was there to delight the eye and distract the heart. So, I think that's what people may not have known they needed, but actually it was a welcome breathe out moment for a few hours.
Oh, you're so right.
So I think all of those things made it a thing. And then it sort of moved forward with that foundation of
hooray, Bridgerton. You're right. There's also something that's so special about, so while the rest of the cast and the characters, they kind of sway in and out of sort of the center fold, they sway around. There are 3 characters who are kind of unshakably sort of central in the middle of it all. And that, of course, is your Lady Danbury, that's Violet Bridgerton, who's played by Ruth Gemmell, and that's Queen Charlotte, who's Golda Rochevelle. Golda Rochevelle. And I think, Adjoa, there's something so special about the way those 3 characters are written, in that they are so 3-dimensional. I mean, all of the characters are, but there's something about these 3 women. They're 3-dimensional. There's moments where they are fierce and they're warriors for the people they love. There are moments of tenderness. Everything that you've said about this whole, why are you like this? Like that time and care has been given to all 3 of these characters, where it's like, here's the heartache they've had, here's where their strength comes from, here's where that little seed of rage within them comes from. And so playing one of those 3 characters, playing Lady Danbury, who is so 3-dimensional, is that lovely? To stand as one of those pillars?
I think what's interesting is that you picked out those 3 characters, because I would say some of that will have come from Queen Charlotte.
Yes.
Where you had a moment. So Absolutely. Queen Charlotte is, for people that don't know Bridgerton, is a spin-off sort of sidebar series where you see those 3 characters younger and it sort of feeds into the whole narrative. So you get a bit more depth coming for those characters. So I think that has something to do with that sense of them. But I do think that there is an interest in older women. There is an interest in seeing what made them who they were, how they tick, what's the front that they put on, what's going on behind. And that's in itself is quite refreshing, I think, to see that being explored as a narrative. Even though actually, if you did a percentage of screen time they may not have
Yeah.
as large percentage of screen time as you
Yes.
might think because of how you feel about them or what you understand about those characters. So I think there's an exploration of that narrative that's quite juicy and absolutely something that I have relished as an actor to do that, and also to celebrate those women. You know, those women are my mum and my grandmothers and my aunties and the friends of my, you know, female friendship is sort of in there as well. And just that thing about women just keep going forward. They have to hold the family together. They're quite often in charge of, you know, encouraging people and working out how to earn a living, how to navigate life, how to guide people to navigate their own lives, you know, making the lemonade from the lemons, all of that sort of stuff.
Absolutely.
And I think with these three, they're quite personality-full characters, and they do have a strong moral compass. I would say that's well, I don't know about the Queen so much. she's allowed to be a bit more giddy, but we love that as well.
Oh yeah,
but you know, we know from Queen Charlotte there is a lot going on for her as well.
Yeah, it's so gorgeous to watch, and Lady Danbury particularly. You play. I mean, firstly, your hats are phenomenal, and the way you work
I'm just going to
with them.
say, if you'd seen photos of my mother or either of my grandmothers, you would know where the hats come from.
Oh, I love that.
They rock the hat. So I wanted to celebrate them.
Yes.
But I also wanted, for me, I wanted to have an element of masculine tailoring for Lady Danbury, because she's an independent woman at a time where women were literally the goods of their husband.
Yeah.
They were the chattels.
Yeah.
And she, you know, now we know her husband died. So she is free of that. She has got money. She has got agency. And so I wanted to reflect that the who she is would have that look about it as well. So the tailoring for her clothes, I do chip in a lot about clothes.
Yes.
I do like an outfit.
Okay.
So
yeah.
And we've got the most, I mean, I'm going to have a big shout out to Melanie Carter, Mel Carter, who makes all my clothes. She is amazing. But we have a most amazing designers and makers for the whole show, and actually that's been a really lovely sidebar for the show, is that all these beautiful skills have come back into working on a regular basis. So tailoring, making of fabric, design, historical cooking. So those meals that you will see are made by really specific experts in that. You know, there's so many areas where artistry and art are being reinvigorated.
Yes, and storytelling through those mediums is so gorgeous. Because there's also every line that you give as Lady Danbury, and this is so much to do with the way you're playing here, and I'm sure the script helps enormously. You're like, oh, Lady Danbury is saying this thing, and there is multitudes of meaning as to why she has said this, you know, because you often have quite wise sort of, and quite firm, quite wise, you know, you say it with a raised eyebrow kind of line, and you're like, oh, there are multitudes in that line. And I may never know what they are, but there are multitudes in why she's just said that. And it's just the loveliest.
The thing for me is, if you feel it, you don't have to know it, but if you feel it somewhere as a viewer, then I've done my job. Because it's the thing I was saying about, you've got to pour your humanity into the character so that they can resonate. Because the job I do is not, you're not a passive absorber as a viewer or an audience member or a listener or whatever it is. It's a conversation. So there may be what the books have intended, then there are what the writers have intended. There'd be Shonda overarching view of all of it, the shaping of the series. Jess Brownell, our showrunner now, and Chris Van Dusen, who initially was the showrunner for the first couple of seasons. They have a story, and then you put the actor in it, and the actor pours in their story and their life experience into it, and then you have the viewer, and the viewer has their own story and their own life experiences, and there will be certain characters who will resonate more with one viewer than with another viewer because of what they've experienced in their life. I talk about when I'm teaching at drama school or I'm giving a lecture somewhere or whatever, I talk about the work we do as being soul work. And I know some people don't like that. I did a TED talk years ago, and I wasn't allowed to say the word soul because they don't like it. I think
Wow.
it feels like it's might be too religiously, spiritually, goddy. But I think for me, it's sort of the essence of a human being. Maybe you can put it in those terms if that's easier. But I think that's the work that we do, and I think when things are hard in life. Say during the lockdown, people turn to the creative world. They turn to, what do you do when, you're mourning someone? You may turn to poetry or to music or to something to express what you find hard to express. What do you do when you're celebrating? You may turn to poetry or to music in celebration and joy. Or you may have that, for me, like reading Beloved, I can only read it on holiday because it makes me too sad. But at the same time, there is an uplift in that that I will carry with me when I am feeling sad or when life does feel a struggle. And I think that's what the arts do. They provide a place of creation and reflection and walking in someone else's shoes. And sometimes they just provide entertainment, when you put your thrash metal album on because what you need is to just go for a bit.
Absolutely. And I think in this sort of cultural moment where what a person is being so boiled down, like so shrunk to our productivity, our whatever that means, our usefulness, whatever that means. Like when we're not in view, we don't exist. All of this talk about like humans being like biological computers, brains in a box, like all of that, which is so the opposite of truth. And it seems like what you're communicating constantly through your work is that's not true. that could not be less what we are.
I think we have to deal with the reality that lots of people's lives are like that. And I feel an immense sort of frustration and sadness about that because we are so much more than that.
Yeah.
We are so rich and interesting. And, and I think something that's happened is because of the world is not allowing us our full humanity, or we are not allowing ourselves our full humanity because we make the world. I think a lot of that is leading to people going into their into defining themselves in a very particular way, and a lot of that comes from not having open access to everything. So that might be around income, or it may be around race or religion or class or sexuality. There's a whole ways in which people are not getting a fair shake of this abundant world. And because they're not getting a fair shake, and they're not getting a fair shake because of things that are put on them that are maybe nothing to do with their heart, the pushback, you'll see people sort of going into their silos a bit. And that's really sad. And very frustrating. But it's a complication, isn't it? Because, all right, say, for example, I directed the first all women of colour Shakespeare in the UK, Richard II, and we had a lovely time. And people would go, well, look at you, you're just going like, what? So we can't have men in it? We can't have white women? What's that about? And for me, it's about a rebalancing. Because part of me wanting to do that was to say, do you know what? All these people, these women of colour, are marvellous and they can do many things if given half a chance. And sometimes they're not getting that half chance purely because of their melanin and their genitalia, which to me is like madness. So I was wanting to rebalance that and to also say to any young women of colour, yes, you can be a stage manager. Yes, you can write the program notes. You can be a composer or a musician or an actor or a director or an assistant director, or, whatever the roles were, or the fight director or the voice coach. You can do all of those things because we can all do those things. So get in there. If that's your bag, get in there, because, you know, you do have to see it to be it, and all those cliches that are true, because that's why they're cliches. But people say, well, you're being really exclusionary. And I'm saying, I'm not trying to be. I'm trying to just rebalance that in that moment. The next show I did, that I directed, it was me in an all-white cast. And in that cast, there were people who were differently able, and all sorts of things happening there as well. So I just want space for everybody to thrive with the gifts that they have been blessed with. Yes. So you could say, well, look at that son of a banker. He's got the best life. He's gone to private school, and he's and he's, you know, got a job for life. But he might really be a ceramicist in his heart. He might not want to be joining the banking dynasty at all, you know, or he may be a wonderful cello player. But so for me, it's all about allowing people the space to be what God intended them to be.
Oh, Adjoa, this has been rich and deep and beautiful, and felt like a sort of a balm. A balm on like the just so much of it is so much of the way you see the world and communicate the world is so enchanting. And so thank you so much for joining me.
Pleasure. Absolute pleasure, Belle.
Thank you so much.